Let's get some analysis from Ivan Eland. He's the director of the Center on Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute and is joining us live now from Washington, D.C. Ivan, as always, good to have you on this program. As we see the political crisis in Iraq deepen and the knock-on effects of that, how will government officials in the United States be viewing the situation?
Well, I think, the U.S. has sort of a legacy interest here, given the U.S. Invasion in 2003 and the long occupation. So I think I think the United States government has been resigned to the fact that Iran has, after all those resources, Iran now has more influence in Iraq than the United States. But I think the United States still would like to say that the country hasn't fallen apart, and and would like to stress that it's in turmoil, but it's still a democracy of some sort. And so it's closely watched. But the Sadrists who took over the parliament, I think, are both anti-Iranian and anti-U.S. The main Shiite alliances are pro-Iran. So any way you look at it, I don't think that there's going to be any more support for the U.S. there.
And you speak about Iran's influence, and it's not just in Iraq, it's in so many other parts of the Middle East as well. And a lot of the anger from the demonstrators is the fear of more politicians in power in Iraq that are aligned with Iran. Do you think we're ever going to come to a point where Washington may decide to try to enter Iraq or try to influence politics there because of their concern about Iran's influence in that country and neighboring regions?
Well, I kind of doubt it. I think the U.S. got its nose bloodied in the long, occupation of Iraq, and I certainly hope they don't go back in there. They should take the lesson that the U.S. should learn, whether it will or not, is that they spent all these resources, and it was very predictable that Iran was eventually going to be the 800-pound gorilla if they took out Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was a very bad man as far as, human rights and that sort of thing, but he was a counterweight to Iran, as George H.W. Bush, the older Bush, realized, but his son, George W. Bush, didn't realize. And so the basic problem is structural now. And it's only natural that Iran is, right in the neighborhood there, and so it's going to have a lot of influence there, one way or the other. And I think the United States they may do some covert. They have supported, with forces and funding and that sort of thing, the Iraqi government at certain times. But I think that I don't see a full-blown military action there. I mean, they may beef up some of their, forces that are helping the Iraqi military, but it will be more of an advisory role than any sort of invasion.
And Ivan, could you just, Iraq can become such a complicated country because there's so many different players here. And one of the issues is that the protesters aren't happy about having a prime minister who's been put up for candidacy now because of his links to Iran. Do you think, or rather, can you tell us why they're so upset with having somebody like him in power? Or do you think it's a power play from the Sadr bloc, because this is something that he has done before?
Well, Sadr, he's very popular in Iraq, and I think he's of the same Shia orientation in Islam, but he's definitely not, and he hasn't been for a long time, very pro-Iranian. And of course, the larger factions are pro-Iranian, and therefore that's the rub here. This is not like a Sunni Shia contest as it was when the U.S. was there. This is a conflict among the Shia majority in the country, but that doesn't mean there are other groups that are not playing in it. But I see that Sadr, he has a popular following, and therefore he has a right to contest these things. He tried to form a government himself there, but was unsuccessful. So he doesn't have enough to do that. But you're seeing the pull and tug of democracy. But unfortunately, democracy shouldn't entail storming the parliament and hundreds of people getting hurt via violence.
Yeah, very much so, the pull and tug of democracy, and yet it's still a country that hasn't actually had a proper government since October's elections last year. Ivan, Eland, good to get your take on the situation in Iraq and America's thoughts on it. Thank you so much.